Wednesday's edition of 2020 Daily Trail Markers, we go to Iowa, where Vice President Mike Pence called on congressional Democrats to put aside their impeachment inquiry of President Trump and instead focus on passing the U.S. trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. The Trump administration signed the USMCA last year, but it has yet to be brought before the House for a vote. Pence made the comments during a speech on his way to a fundraising event in Des Moines.
The truth is, and we all know it, Democrats have been spending all their time on endless investigations and a partisan impeachment. But enough is enough. The American people deserve better.
CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Musadiq Bidar was at the Iowa event, and he joins me now. Musadiq, thank you so much for being with us. What was Vice President Mike Pence's message to Iowa voters on Wednesday?
Elaine, he spoke at length about the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, also known as the USMCA. He urged everyone in attendance to call their members of Congress and get them to bring this up to a vote. As you mentioned, the deal President Trump signed with Canada and Mexico nearly a year ago, but it hasn't been ratified. So Vice President Pence told everyone to push their members of Congress, get them to bring this up to a vote, and he said he wants this passed within the year. But unfortunately, Democrats have not brought this up to a vote, he said. There have been some concerns that have been raised by Democrats and some labor groups about what it would mean for worker protections and the environment. Interestingly, today in an interview published in the Washington Post, Richard Trumka, who is the head of the AFL-CIO, one of the largest labor groups that represents over 12 million people, said that it would be a colossal mistake for Congress to bring this up to a vote before Thanksgiving. He said it would be defeated. Vice President Pence urged Congress to take this up to a vote before the end of the year.
So you spoke to some people who attended that event. Let's listen.
You know, the farming community needs this USMCA, and the Congress sitting around just stinks. So if you're not going to work for the people, then don't come back. Don't be there. Get somebody that will do something, because the only person I see working is on my hat.
All of our congressmen need to be thinking about the Americans first and put this impeachment thing down. I mean, we need to get to the bottom of it and finish it, because it's taken away all the time from the American people. And I think the people are starting to get a little upset about what's going on in Congress, because nothing else is getting done.
So, Musadiq, did the people you spoke to agree with the Vice President that members of Congress should stop focusing on impeachment and instead work on ratifying the USMCA?
Absolutely. I spoke to about a half dozen voters before and after the event, and everybody, especially after hearing Vice President Mike Pence and Iowa Senators Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley, and even Iowa's Governor Kim Reynolds, they told me that they want to see this deal passed. On the impeachment front, everybody that I spoke with at this event told me that it was pointless. One woman, her name was Edna, in her late 80s, she told me that Democrats are, quote, crazy. She said from her perspective, she doesn't see an impeachable offense from President Trump. And interestingly, she said that the reason she believes Democrats are moving forward with this impeachment inquiry is because they're scared of facing President Trump again in 2020. And she said they don't want to see what happened to them in 2016, so they're trying to impeach him now so that they don't have to face him again in 2020. But everybody afterwards told me that they want to see this USMCA deal passed. They feel that it will greatly benefit Iowa farmers and Iowa manufacturers.
Well, after his speech, the Vice President spoke to reporters about the president's communication with the leader of Ukraine. Mr. Pence was asked if he would release a transcript of his own calls with President Zelensky. Here's what he said.
I'd have no objection to that, and we're discussing that with White House counsel as we speak. But when people see the transcripts of my calls and when they hear the reporting of our conversation, President Trump's focus with Ukraine from the very beginning was on enlisting more European support and supporting President Zelensky's efforts to advance reforms that would end an era of corruption in Ukraine. I never discussed the issue of the Bidens with President Zelensky.
So, Musadiq, while the vice president was focusing attention away from the impeachment inquiry and on this trade agreement, obviously the questions about Ukraine are not going away. How is he handling that?
Well, he tried to say that he himself, Vice President Pence, did not speak with President Zelensky about the Bidens. He also said all of his conversations focused on Ukraine's sovereignty and Ukraine's defense. He said the focus there for him was making sure that other European nations are contributing to Ukraine's defense. And so hearing him, it was interesting to hear Vice President Pence say that in all of his conversations, he never spoke with President Zelensky about the Bidens, something that has put President Trump in trouble and led to this impeachment inquiry.
Well, many of the issues that Iowa farmers and manufacturers are facing are tied to foreign policy that goes beyond this trade agreement with our neighbors. Explain to us why diplomacy and America's reputation abroad is a high priority for those voters in particular.
Sure. Well, the last few weeks, I've spoken with nearly 36 Democratic voters and some independents about this issue. And just about nearly everyone, while they bring up trade as an important foreign policy issue for them, they've also spoken about ending lengthy wars abroad, restoring America's standing in the world. And trade is specifically, as we've talked about a number of times, is important here in Iowa. The state has about 13 million acres of corn farms and about 10 million acres of soybean farms. Even Republican voters will tell you that it is starting to impact them. Before the trade war escalated, a bushel of soybeans traded at about $11. As of this week, that's about hovering around $9. Your average farmer produces about 50,000 bushels of soybeans. So when you put that into context, that's nearly $100,000 of lost revenue each year. So even Republican voters, and especially Democrats, want to see this trade war ending. They don't want the president conducting trade policy via Twitter. And Democrats, the voters that I've spoken with over the last few weeks, want to hear Democratic presidential candidates start to discuss this a little more on the campaign trail.
All right, we'll see if they do. Musadiq Bidar for us. Musadiq, thank you so much.
Thanks, Elaine.